It is my pleasure to welcome anyone who's tuning in live to this installment of our virtual free talks, which is a program that is supported by HBO year-round in our theaters. And this summer, because of our theater closure due to COVID, we have moved them all online. And so these events are fully in the virtual space. So thank you so much to our audience for joining us. And especially thanks to Judd Apatow, who is with us today to talk about his latest film, The King of Staten Island. And you know, wherever the conversation takes us, I imagine it'll go beyond the latest film. But we're really happy to have Judd here and happy to be able to connect with an audience, hopefully that's sort of geographically more expansive than those who would be able to attend an event like this in our New York theaters. So thank you all for being here. And I'll just say before we dive in, if you're watching live and you'd like to submit a question, there's like a chat function on the YouTube page where you're watching, where you can send in questions, and those will be passed along and we can hopefully incorporate some of them into this conversation. So I don't want to take up too much time with this boilerplate stuff. So why don't we just dive right in? Judd, thank you for being here again.
This is my virtual space right here. As a director, I hear my air conditioning and I will shut it off. That's a director's, you know, that's the kind of choices you make as a director. You shut off loud things. Normally the sound person would yell at me and go, what's that noise? Is that a fridge? Can someone shut the noise? Can someone get the barking dog? Can someone get $50 to the neighbor to bring the barking dog inside? People don't talk enough about how in neighborhoods, people want bribes to be quiet. You know, people have a loud party going on. Sometimes it's a gardener with an air blower. Like, there are people who like slip in 50s to people to be quiet. Sometimes people go to neighborhoods to make noise, to get bribes to be quiet. This is the kind of information you're going to get right now.
Yeah.
At this talk.
And I think we can all use it right now because we're all on so many Zoom calls and
That's right.
FaceTime meetings, and
I don't have sound issues.
Yeah,
Sound issues.
I hope you'll let me know if you can hear any background noise from my end that's getting in the way of things.
I didn't hear any background noise, and then I was ashamed of my noise. That's how that happened. I had guilt about my noise.
Well, I think we're on the same page, so it sounds good to me. Sounds good to you.
Excellent.
I actually, the first question I have for you is kind of not so far afield from what you were just talking about in terms of the process of filming on location. The King of Staten Island obviously is set in Staten Island, and I felt a really strong sort of connection to this film because until fairly recently I was living in Staten Island. I lived there for about 2.5 years, and it's a funny place to live as a young adult. And this movie is very much rooted in the space in which it takes place. I mean, New York is one of the sort of most cinema-friendly cities in the world, but we don't really see many movies that even approach Staten Island or even attempt to show it. So I was hoping you could just talk about how you approached making a movie that was so rooted in that particular space that hasn't really gotten much cinematic attention in the past.
I think that, you know, for people around the country who don't know where Staten Island is right next to Manhattan, and you can see Manhattan from Staten Island. It has the most incredible view. It would be the most expensive view in the world of the gorgeous skyline in Manhattan. But there's nothing on Staten Island that would make you go there unless you had a friend or a family member there or you lived there. There's no like culture. There's not museums or, you know, shows and theaters. There's no, you know, Great Adventure or Six Flags Staten Island. It's just it's a really nice place where people live. A lot of the island is the borough is very, you know, blue collar. There are some people who commute from there, and you know, a lot of people who stay there don't leave. And Pete talked a lot about as a young kid, they never left. I mean, he would go a whole year without leaving, even though Manhattan is right there. Like, you could see it. It's like 15 minutes away. And so it has its own culture because it is a bit of a bubble. Like, why did you move to Staten Island?
It was a number of factors, but mostly finances. It was I could get more space there for cheaper, and had sort of a roundabout friend of a friend connection who uh, allowed me to find a place to live there. And it's a great place to live, but it's hard to commute from Staten Island to Manhattan every day.
Because
So,
that's the traffic. See, if
yes.
I was going from Manhattan to Staten Island every morning, no one is going to Staten Island to work. So there's no traffic. So it was perfect both ways. But am I wrong? Is there culture in Staten Island that I am not aware of? Is there aspects of Staten Island that should be pulling people there that I just didn't see?
I mean, there's definitely ambient culture in the sense of like there's, most of the people who live there, as you sort of see in the film, have lived there their whole lives, and probably their parents lived there and raised them there. And especially among young adults, it's sort of the sense that most of the young people who live there are kind of stuck there, whether they choose to be or not. Some people it's by choice, some people less by choice, but I think part of what I loved about the film was that it captured that sort of that feeling of being there, and being so close to so much culture and so much sort of cosmopolitan influence, but also feeling at a remove from it, and feeling kind of like you have to sort of dig in and make a culture out of the distance from Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, there was even more moments in the movie where Pete and his friends were talking about their dreams, and Moises, was saying, I'm just waiting, for my grandfather to die so I could join that union and take his place. They had all of these, their dreams, and Ricky Velez, his character Oscar, was, talking about how that he was having trouble getting a job because he has a record, and it's hard to for him to get into a union. And they were discussing trying to find jobs that had health care, and we went a little bit farther in some of our improvs about a feeling of hopelessness, but also a sense that they were comfortable there. There is a moment when they're talking about Staten Island, and Pete's character says, "I feel safe here," and Ricky's like, "I love it here. We have deer, we have nature." At some point, I don't know if he stayed in the movie, he says, "No one wants to come here because you got to take a boat here. You have to go on a voyage." But I love shooting there. Everyone was really nice. I'm from Long Island, so it just felt like where I grew up. So it was really great, and everyone was really nice to us when we shot there. And I'm glad they're getting some attention and respect.
I like that too. I felt seen by this film, and I felt like the people who were my neighbors for several years were well represented. I'm interested in your creative process in collaborating with Pete Davidson. I know that you've been sort of a champion of his comedy career from its early stages, and this movie really feels like a partnership between you and him. I know you co-wrote it
With Dave Cyrus.
And it sounds like I just hope you could talk about sort of the writing process and how that fed into the actual shooting process of starring Pete and having him involved in the improv part of it.
Well, when I first met Pete, he did a cameo in Trainwreck. Amy Schumer told me about Pete, and he was so funny that Bill Hader recommended him to Saturday Night Live, and all of a sudden, this kid that we were like, "Oh, he's kind of funny. I could see him doing some cool things." Immediately was on Saturday Night Live, and his career was taking off. And during those early years, I gave him an idea for a script, and him and Dave worked on it for a while. And it was a bad idea. I gave him a really bad idea. Well, maybe a not appropriate for him idea. It related to college. Pete didn't even go to college. Like, none of it really worked. And I wasted a lot of his time. But it was fun to write a script, and it was his first time writing a screenplay with Dave. And then at some point, we were talking again, and we said, maybe that's the wrong idea. And Pete had been playing around with trying to do something about how he wanted his mom to be in a relationship or to have sex, like some sort of more raucous comedy about trying to hook his mom up. And I said, well, isn't the truth that you wouldn't want to hook your mom up? You probably would be mad if she had a new relationship. It would create a lot of problems for you. And if it was a fireman, then what would happen? And then we started talking about what would that bring up? What trauma, what obstacles? And then that led to conversations where we discussed if he was comfortable doing that. How far do you want to go? How deep do you want to go? And very quickly he said, I'll go all the way. I'll really discuss this. And then it becomes a question about, well, this could be very serious because you've had real issues emotionally around the feelings that all this trauma has brought up for you. And he was very excited to explore it. And I talked to his mom, and she told me about it from her perspective. And he was a great partner. He's a very transparent person. He doesn't want to hold anything back. A lot of people go, I don't want to talk about that. That'll make me look weird. Like, we can talk about this part, but not that part. And for Pete, he was an open book about it. And we knew it was a story about someone trying to heal, but also having a manic episode. I looked at the movie as about a manic episode, about someone whose mom starts dating a firefighter after having lost his father, who was a firefighter, and just losing it for most of the movie and getting very erratic. And then in the third act, slowly coming down to earth. And it was really fun to write with Pete because he is really hilarious and he goes deep, and most people don't.
That kind of gets at one part of this movie that I think is kind of a departure in your body of work, which is that it's really about grief in a way that I can't recall any of your previous films diving into grief in quite such a sort of raw way. And but at the same time, it's sort of riffing on or developing themes that you've spent a lot of time cultivating in your work, and of sort of young adults sort of trying to make their way into adulthood and sort of find ways to self-actualize and to become fulfilled. And was the element of grief that sort of is an undercurrent in the story, was that a contribution of Pete's, or was that something that sort of emerged organically?
The first idea was to write about sacrifice. After I did Trainwreck, I just had this thought, like, I got to find a new subject. Am I repeating myself? And I thought, well, what don't I write about? And I was trying to think of what that was. What would you think Judd would never do? And then I thought, okay, sacrifice, like people are willing to, risk their lives for other people. And I wasn't sure how to do that. I wrote one screenplay with a friend about returning soldiers from Afghanistan. And I think it's also what led me to be very interested in directing the documentary about Gary Shandling, because I was interested in grief, my own grief about Gary, and also his grief about his brother who died when he was a kid and how it affected him his entire life. So these ideas of grief and sacrifice were in my mind. And then when Pete and I started talking about this, I realized, oh, this is something that I have felt the need to explore in a bunch of different projects. I also produced a stand-up special for Chris Gethard for HBO called Career Suicide, which was about some of his mental health issues over the years. And I did the same for Gary Goldman, who had an HBO special called The Great Depression. And I felt myself moving towards projects about mental health issues and depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation. And all of this led to working with Pete. I think I learned a lot from Chris and Gary, and I learned a lot from Gary Shandling in making that documentary, which I was able to apply to these feelings that Pete has had. And I tried to write about it previously when I did Funny People. My mom died the year before of cancer, and I was very interested in her emotional state because she was a neurotic person and a little bit manic, and she would be on medicine, and sometimes she would think that she was going to get better. And in those moments, she would get very neurotic And when she thought she was not going to survive, she got very calm and didn't care about all the things that made her neurotic during her life. She just dropped it all, like, yeah, who cares? Why am I getting crazy about that? And then she'd go on a new medicine and they would say, I think you're going to live. And suddenly all the things that consumed her that shouldn't consume her came back. And that was a lot of the inspiration for Adam Sandler's character in Funny People. So I guess as I get older, these are the things that interest me. And I found a great partner in Pete to explore it, from all sorts of angles and to go to the core, which is what Gary Shandling has always talked about in the work. Like you're trying to go to the core.
I know I read a lot to prepare for this. And I know that you've talked about Bill Burr, who plays Pete's mom's new boyfriend, and that he has a close relationship with Pete in real life and has sort of been a mentor to him. What was your thinking in terms of crafting the characters of his mom and her boyfriend, and that's also so much of this film is about the relationship between him and his mom, and just an adult child sort of struggling to fly the coop, and his mom. And so what thinking went into those casting choices and character development?
Well, in real life, Pete's mom is really an incredible person. She worked 2 jobs to take care of Pete and his sister. She was an emergency room nurse and a school nurse at the same time for most of his childhood. And she really gave of herself to take care of him, to make sure that, that he, was taken care of and safe. And it took an enormous amount of energy because Pete was having a very difficult time with this loss. And she has an incredible spirit. She's really up and positive and funny, and she's a very special person. So early on in the process, we thought, well, the dream is to get Marisa Tomei to play this because she can capture all those things. She's funny, she's warm, but she's really tough and strong. And part of the movie is a mother wondering if she's coddling her son. She doesn't know if she's going to hurt him, if she's tough on him. She doesn't know what that line is. And when she starts dating this firefighter, he's like, "Yes, be tough. Just be tough on him. No, kick him out." And I'm sure that they debated like in a month, in 2 months, and she worked it in 9 months. And part of the joke of the movie is they say move out in 9 months, and Pete's character acts like they said move out in 2 days. He's at that level of panic. For the character of the firefighter, I think we thought it's almost like this man is what Scott's father would have been at this time. This is him grown up another 17 years. So he's a flawed person, and he's divorced, which would scare Scott. Is he a terrible dad? Is he a terrible husband? Is he good enough for my mom? And we wanted him to be a flawed person because Scott's father was flawed, and Scott's flawed, and that's part of what we wanted to talk about, which is how do we heal? How do we connect? Do people have to be perfect for us to open our hearts to them? What do we expect from them? And so we wanted you to get the feeling that this firefighter wants another chance also. He wants another chance for love and happiness. And when he meets Marisa Tomei, he realizes this is it. This is a perfect person. Even as he's screaming at her because her son tattooed his son, he's falling in love with her as he's screaming at her. That's how we looked at it. And Bill Burr is someone that we've all known for a long time, who's very opinionated and funny and brash, but we also know him as this guy with this big heart who's actually very sweet underneath all of that, and just a wonderful person. And I thought, well, because Pete and Bill know each other and love each other, even when they hate each other in the movie, you'll feel that there's something drawing them together, that, on some level, this guy's supposed to become his new parent, his new father.
This is sort of touches on another element of your work that I've always found really interesting, is you got your start in stand-up and continue to sort of return to it I know that in the recent years, you've done your own stand-up, or sort of returned to it in your own work, but you also draw heavily on these sort of creative networks of comics. And in this film, you know, Pete started in stand-up, Bill Burr started in stand-up. It's there's sort of this rich network of creative voices that you're tapping into. And I'm interested in how your own work in stand-up has, this is sort of a big picture question, but how does it translate and sort of continue to inform your work, which is still comedy, but sort of very expansive kind of comedy?
I think that doing stand-up for me, you know, it certainly freshens you up and tunes you in some way. If you're a filmmaker, you know, you spend a lot of your time alone writing or with a person writing. Maybe if you're on a TV show with a staff and you're with your editor for 6 months making a movie. So you have limited connection with the audience other than your screenings of your film, where you can tell if they like it or you don't. But when you're a stand-up comedian and if you perform a few times a week, you're having a conversation with the audience, and in a corny way, you're having a conversation with America. I mean, you can feel what people are thinking about and caring about. And I think it just helps me connect with the concerns of the country. Because I travel around a little bit, not a ton, but I'll go to different cities, and you could tell based on when you talk about politics or your life, you know, what people are thinking about. And I think it just makes people funnier. And so if you're a writer or a director and you happen to do stand up, it keeps you current in some way. It's very easy probably to just lose touch. I always joke about, you know, great classic rock bands, and they had a lot of hits 20 years ago, and they're just sitting home going, how come this new stuff isn't hitting? How come isn't this album as good as that one I did in 1982? Like, what's going wrong that I'm out of touch with the audience? Why don't they like this stuff? And I do think that in terms of my writing and stand-up, that can happen because you're just not talking to people. You're not among them. You're just in your editing bay alone. And so it's helped me a lot. And also meeting people. I wouldn't have met a ton of people that I've worked with if I wasn't in the clubs. So I met through Pete and other people, you know, people like Ricky Velez, who plays Oscar, and Lynn Koplitz plays Marissa's sister Joy, and Derek Gaines plays the guy who beats him up in Fight Club. You know, Lou Wilson, who plays Richie, you know, he does improv at places like UCB. You know, we have Rich Voss and Bonnie McFarlane are the couple that yell at them. And, you know, they all are from the stand-up and improv worlds. And they're so funny and so interesting. And I find that comedians are generally really good actors and actresses. And they're just eccentric and interesting, and they're fun to watch. Keith Robinson, who is the security guard who yells at Pete, he was also in Trainwreck screaming at John Cena in the movie theater. I mean, we've met so many people that way.
Would you say you think of yourself as sort of a mentor at this point in terms of fostering young talent? I know that in a number of, you know, interviews and a lot of the writing that's out there about your work, large focus is on sort of how you've helped introduce talented younger comics to the world. And do you see that as sort of a byproduct of your creative work, or as sort of a central part of it?
You know, it's hard to say. I'm just a fan of talented people, and I don't really care if they have experience or not. Is probably, you know, what it is. Sometimes you see somebody and you're like, it's that person. That's the person. I mean, separate from being in show business and trying to make things, I'll just see someone and go, I want to watch their movie. Oh, they don't have a movie. I guess I have to help them make the movie. It wasn't different than when I was a kid and I was in the clubs, and I remember seeing Jim Carrey before his career took off. And I just thought, this is the greatest, funniest person ever. If anything, his career was not doing well at all. But in the clubs, he was a genius, and he was inventing all the things that he later did in movies. So as a fan, I'm very attracted to that moment when people are learning who they are and having that first giant artistic spark. It's a lot like when you love a band's first record and you like hear an album by like the Strokes or somebody and you're like, who is that? And you lose your mind over this first album, right? And I feel that way about comedy people. And then because it's what I do for a living, sometimes I'll say, you want to do something together? You want to see if we could, might I be helpful in getting you to figure out how to take what you do, as a comedian and turn it into a TV show or a movie? How can we learn how to translate it to a different medium?
And I might be projecting here, but I feel like that comes across even in the stories that you tell, and just sort of your excitement at encountering somebody who's maybe like on the cusp of making it out in the world, and just needs a little something to get there.
Well, usually people have a great story, like something happened to them and they have a great story, or they have a great personality issue or something that would make for not their best, but one of their best movies. And most people only have a couple of them, the thing that happened to them. So with Kumail Nanjiani and Emily Gordon, they have this incredible story that became The Big Sick, but they don't have 25 of them. They have, and maybe there's a few more. And Pete has this life story, which is so emotional and engaging. And so it's fun to find people before they've mined all of their experience in their work. I mean, you can continue to do amazing things all through your life. The new Bob Dylan record is great. It's not that you can't, but it is certainly a fun moment to try to figure certain things out early.
So you're a director, and you also have written a lot of films, both that you've directed and that other people have directed. And in some ways, maybe your biggest sort of footprint on the industry right now is as a producer. You've got production credits on most of the great American comedies that have come out in the last 20 years. And I'm interested in sort of the rhythm of your work and how when you're evaluating a project or coming into a project, what determines what your role in that project will be, and how do you sort of is it a timing thing, or is it a sort of matter of inspiration?
Sometimes it's timing. I'm usually in a phase of either about to direct something or not, and so sometimes I'm just stuck and I'm free, and other times I'm very I'm passionate about something. So and sometimes people have an idea and I think I can be very helpful in the development of this, and I probably will be helpful in finding you the right director, but I think someone will do this better than I would do it. I'm going to lean out of frame because I had an ice cream cone right before this.
Oh no.
And my nose is running. And so I will leave the frame so that you don't have to watch me deal with it. See?
Much appreciated.
You know what? Scorsese didn't do this.
Well, I
apologize for sniffing.
No.
I shouldn't be sneaking out having ice cream when the family's not looking. They're like, don't have ice cream, and I'm just like, you know what? I've been in the house with you for 4 months straight. Occasionally, I need a little sugar rush. This is how I get through.
That's karma, basically.
Yes. But basically, certain movies, I think someone can do this better. When we were developing Superbad, I was working on Knocked Up, for a lot of that time. So it didn't feel like it would time out right for me to direct. But at the same time, I always had an instinct that it needed someone who understood the camera more, and energy and motion, because it was the kind of movie that needed a certain momentum, that needed to look great so it wouldn't feel like just two kids talking. And I didn't want it to feel like a dumb movie. I didn't want it to just feel like this weird movie with dirty kids, talking about girls. And I thought there's a way to elevate this both emotionally and cinematically. And Greg Mottola was someone I was a gigantic fan of, who I had worked with on our TV show Undeclared. And I was like, he could do the thing that I think I don't know how to do yet. And then he really did. And, the same thing happened on The Pineapple Express, David Gordon Green came in, and it was just shot in such a unique, weird way, and he had so many wild ideas and had such a great time with Seth and Evan on it, and it became something very special. So that happens a fair amount of the time, and then other times I'll say, oh, I think I could do this well, which was the case with Amy Schumer.
And this one, I guess.
And this one, yes. Now I'm gonna blow my nose so you could see it. Now awesome. I'm gonna have you see it, because it's just it's a fountain now. It's just a fountain. We can't hide what's happening right now. I just had too much ice cream, and I shouldn't have dairy. This is the main lesson for all you film people out there. Don't have dairy. Don't have gluten. Don't enjoy anything, by the way. Don't have anything that you'll enjoy. It's all bad for you.
I feel like this is the LA mentality versus the New York mentality. New York just sort of piles it on, even when it's too much in LA.
Well, you develop an ability to deal with it by never eating right. By never eating right, your body adjusts. And it's like, I guess we're going to have an enormous amount of gluten because this person does not care.
I think in quarantine, we're all kind of on that page.
How are we not going to have gluten in quarantine and sugar?
It's not possible, I don't think.
Right?
Yeah.
I bought like a little bag of about like 900 Kit Kats the other day. And my wife was like, why are you having a bag of 900 Kit Kats? I'm like, I've been in the house for 4 months. I can't have this.
You deserve your Kit Kats, I think.
I deserve 900 Kit Kats. Which
actually is another question that I had sort of on this topic is releasing a movie during quarantine. I, for one, am glad that you and Universal decided to go ahead and put this movie out, because I think it's a summer film in a lot of ways, and it felt like this was the moment, when it was released earlier in June. But I imagine that's also difficult because it was going to have a festival premiere and it was going to, have a normal theatrical release. And as the director, what was your perspective on all that?
We have a usual way of doing things, which is we try to make the movie as well as we can, and then we test it. Then hopefully we like it. And then if we like it, we show it at South by Southwest, which is always just a great festival. And a lot of people appreciate our style. And then hopefully it goes well and the little buzz starts like, hey, man, this movie's kind of a little better than we thought it was going to be. And we ride that to some sort of early summer release. And we've done that a few times, and it's been fantastic. But we felt that the world was changing and something very serious was happening with the pandemic, and I let go of that dream of how this would happen very early. I just thought, this is very serious. My movie does not matter at all. I'm not going to have any energy about it. I'm not going to have any hopes for it. I'm just going to shelve it and not think about it. And at some point, someone will want to talk about it, but I'm just not going to have any secret plan. Even it's done. I like it. Somehow people are going to see it. I don't know how. And when we started talking about it, about its distribution, I thought, this movie's kind of about what we're going through. It's about grief and loss and sudden trauma and first responders and these people who are willing to risk their lives for everybody else, and firefighters and nurses. And it just occurred to me, oh, maybe this was supposed to come out now. I'm not a very religious person, but every once in a while, I do feel like things line up, for some reason. Universal intelligence, who knows? I don't know. As they say, you have to love the mystery. I don't know how the universe works, but part of me thought it's supposed to come out now. People are home. They're feeling terrible. They need a break. They need laughter. They need a way to process these emotions. And it just felt right to release it this way. I had no sense if that would be a financial disaster or a plus. It just felt really wrong to say, let's hold on to this for a year, even though people desperately need some sort of joy and release in this moment. And I think that people really appreciated the film, and I've enjoyed having so many people see it. I feel like there's an argument to be made that more people will see it now in this moment than maybe would have even seen it in the theater.
Yeah, and I certainly sort of selfishly hope that it has a robust second run and repertory presence, just because it's a movie that feels big and sort of an epic scale, and It's good to be watching, to be able to dig into something that like that right now, but also I can't wait to see it on the big screen.
I mean, we've discussed it. We've discussed maybe at a safe, appropriate time, we could get on 1,000 screens for a weekend or a few weekends. And a lot of the people who like the movie maybe would like to have that communal experience of seeing it. Because when we tested it, we did test it with big crowds, and it's really fun to watch with people. The comedy side plays very big, but there is a part of me that thinks that the movie is very intimate and it's emotional. And when you watch it at home alone or just with, a friend or a spouse, you might give yourself over to it more. You might be more willing to feel it deeply and go to those places that relate to that type of emotion and grief and this journey. And so I do think there might be something positive for this movie about seeing it in an intimate setting without someone eating popcorn next to you, making noise, talking on their phone. You could lose yourself a little more at home.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have a few questions coming in from the audience, so I want to get to some of those because I know we're getting short on time.
I have nowhere to go. I've been in the house for 4 months. People are always like, "We're out of time." I'm like, "Where are we going?"
Awesome.
I'm not out of time.
Awesome.
I don't think the stream runs out.
I mean, I'm
just going to walk in the other room and watch the news. I don't want to watch the news. Can we stay here for a minute?
Yeah, I'd rather be talking to you, frankly. Yeah, and I mean I'm already thinking of other questions I'd like to ask you. But in the meantime, let me check on some of these audience questions that are coming in. Someone is asking about your collaboration with Robert Elswit on this film,
yes.
And it's speaking of sort of the question of watching it on a big screen or a small screen. It's a really visually striking film, and he's a very visually striking cinematographer, director of photography. And how did you end up collaborating with him, and what sort of came from that?
Well, Ben Still and I met with him when we were doing The Cable Guy in 1995. And for some reason, he did not get hired. And he made a movie called Unlawful Entry with Kurt Russell and Ray Liotta, a scary movie back then. And I've always loved him and loved his work with Paul Thomas Anderson. He also did Michael Clayton and Syriana. He did There Will Be Blood. So he's the kind of person you dream that you can collaborate with. I was reading the trades, and a movie he was working on lost financing and fell through, and I called him 15 seconds after. I'm like, "You're free. Oh my God, you're free." And I told him about the movie, and he signed on even before reading the script. And he was fantastic because people don't realize that a lot of your collaboration isn't just the coverage and the shots and the lighting. He spends months location scouting and picking all the spots where you're going to shoot, and it's so intimate. We worked with Kevin Thompson, the production designer, and it's so fun. You're in a van, and he's like, yeah, I'd shoot this house instead of that house, and he's always right. It's always fun when someone's way better than you, because if you're like, which apartment should we shoot this in? He's like, that one. You're like, we're done. You don't have to even have opinions. But he's so funny, and he really got what the vibe of the movie was. And we wanted it to feel like a Sidney Lumet movie from the 70s or a Hal Ashby movie. And I felt like his work as a camera operator was really remarkable, because for this movie, unlike some of my other movies, I didn't want it to be so locked down. So the entire movie's handheld, and he's just searching for what he wants to cover in a lot of the moments. And his instincts about where to be and how to move are just remarkable. And I think that's why the movie's, visually so interesting. It's really his eye. It's his, his instincts.
You sort of actually started to answer another one of the questions that's come in from our viewers, which is someone asks what films have inspired your visual style. I know you've talked a lot about your comedic influences, and I'm also interested in what, you mentioned Hal Ashby, Sidney Lumet.
There's certain movies I always go back to watch. I love Alexander Payne movies. I've worked with Fabian Papa Michael, who has shot a lot of those films. He did This Is 40. Sideways is kind of a fantastic looking movie, and I always study it and go like, why does it look so good? It's so simple and elegant and perfect. I love The Last Detail, the Hal Ashby movie. That I always go back to that. I love The King of Comedy, has a lot of energy and is shot in a really cool way. And I love the Bob Fosse movies. I think that the visual style of movies, like All That Jazz and Lenny, really apply to how I'm trying to direct. Because for the most part, I don't want the audience to realize there is a director. I want it to feel a little documentary-like. And I don't want you to ever go like, wow, Judd made a cool shot there. I really don't want you to know I exist. I want you to feel like you've forgotten that this whole world is false. I just want you to believe all of it. I don't want you to feel like there's any self-conscious artistry to it. And there is a line in my mind, at least, for what that is. I love movies that make those strong choices. Just for me, it's not how I see my stories, and that's usually what I'm trying to do.
How does sort of building on that, how does that inform the editing process, which I imagine is kind of complicated given the sort of improvisational sort of emphasis on hangout periods where people are just sort of riffing and talking?
I know what the purpose of a scene is, and I have a script that we've worked on in rehearsals and table reads. So, our process is to rehearse a lot, get a great version of the scene, and then shoot it, and then slowly let go of it. And so we'll get it, and then we start playing, and then usually the improvs start leading you somewhere where you go, oh, I think it's this. It's probably this. So let's make sure we cover this. And then at the end we might go, let's really let it go. For instance, when Pete is with all his friends and they start making jokes about the fact that his father died, I know I need a great joke. I also need a surprising joke. And I need you to feel like this is real. It's very hard to write someone being funny and to get another actor or actress to laugh and for it not to feel like constructed bullshit. And so I want them to surprise each other. And so Ricky Velez, who's one of Pete's best friends, when we were shooting that scene, he improvises, knock, knock, who's there? Not your dad. Now, only your best friend would have the balls to say that. And only he would know that it's okay to say that, at least from him. And it's perfect for the movie. And it basically says a lot because it's about the fact that even his closest friends, he's hidden the fact that he's not healed. He doesn't feel better. He's completely messed up, but he's convincing everyone around him that he's over it. And that it's not a touchy subject, when in fact, of course, it's the most touchy subject. And so I'm hoping in improvisation that something like that happens every once in a while. Something that I couldn't write. I need the actors to surprise me. As he leans out, oh, hold on, I dropped something. Oh yeah, there it is. Sorry, it's all the way down here.
Oh
Yeah, there you go.
Beautiful. Just well choreographed.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions that I could sort of go off on tangents in terms of asking about your previous work, but I guess I'll sort of try to sort of hybridize one of the questions that came in from the audience, which is asking about sort of creative opportunities that are presented by this moment in sort of the sort of digital medium that we're all sort of being stuck in right now. And I would tie that in with sort of a question about your TV work, and how you think of whether when you have a story to tell, how do you decide how to tell it, whether it deserves a film sort of format or a TV format, a more sort of expansive narrative?
Every story can go series these days, right? Like you could do King of Staten Island as a series. A lot of people tend to want to write for TV because they get a job that lasts a while. Like I feel like sometimes it's as simple as that. Like, how come we don't get more people interested in writing movies? Because I feel like a lot of comedy writers have moved to TV. because it might be a job that lasts for 6-7 years, and the streamers need so much stuff that they can siphon off a lot of the great talent to do television work. For instance, Paul Rust and Leslie Arfin came to me and they said, "Oh, we want to do a show about our relationship." And then I forgot if it was like a movie or a TV show, and I said, I always had this idea about like a TV show that was like a relationship, but you really see every detail, like every single detail of it. So if they break up, we might go 5 episodes where they don't see each other, and it would be, if there was a pause between the first date and the second date, maybe the whole episode is the pause, and they don't call each other for an episode. And so we decided, I guess that's a TV show. Let's go TV show on that one. But with every idea, we are having that debate about how best to do it. And a lot of times TV wins because people like the idea of making 8 or 10 of their idea. I miss the fact that more people aren't excited about writing movies. When I first started out, no one talked about TV shows. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's all in movies. This is how you break everybody." The people that used to we used to fight hard to get them a film break. Now they're getting series. So I don't know what the counterbalance to that will be to help, but hopefully it doesn't happen. Oh, wait a second. I'm going to reject you. I'm rejecting you right now. That was Mike Pence.
Oh.
That was Mike Pence. He had questions for me.
Yeah,
and then I do also think, we're all thinking about diversity and how, we can use this moment to give people a chance to tell their stories. And, for me as a producer, I just try to be open to taking pitches and saying, who's underserved, who's not getting a shot? How could we use our power to get behind someone to get something made? And that's, for instance, what we did with The Big Sick. It's what we did with Girls and with Bridesmaids. Like, we're trying to find ways to tell people, if you have a great story or you should be a showrunner, let's talk about it and see if we can be helpful, and if we can throw our weight around something. That's what we're trying to do. We're about to produce a movie with Billy Eichner, a romantic comedy, and that was about to shoot right when the pandemic started. And we have a lot of things. We've been talking about this for a few years, expanding it, because I don't want everything I do to be about like white Jewish guy from Long Island. Obviously, the first few things you do are like that because that's all you know, and then slowly you look for partners and you want to write about other people's experiences. But I can't do it alone. Like, I need to partner with people in order to accomplish that. And I think that we've found a way to do it that works really well now, and hopefully we'll do some good stuff going forward.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, but I will sort of wrap it up with a question that I think sort of follows on what you just said, which is that, we're all, during quarantine, we're all stuck at home with our families and our roommates and our partners. And you're in an interesting position in that your family is also made up of your creative partners. You've done a lot of work with your wife, Leslie Mann, and your daughters. And have you gotten any kind of inspiration or insight that you think will inform your creative work with them from this time of really intense togetherness?
I think it's as simple as, when you're around people all the time, you get a very up close look to how they're navigating life and their issues, their problems, their dreams, their hopes, their happiness. And for me, it's really fun to work with people who I know very, very well. We can, it's like writing a song with somebody. And that's what, This Is 40 was. That's what Making Funny People with Adam Sandler was. I like the experience of working with intimates, whether it's friends or family. And I certainly never think I'll say, damn, I wish I worked with strangers on that one and not my family, because they're unique and creative and really funny. But also, it's like Pete and Ricky Velez in the King of Staten Island, they know each other so well that they could just do some stuff and reveal some things that it would be harder to do if it was someone who just met Pete. And you know people, and you know what triggers them, and you know how they behave in certain circumstances. So at this time, I sit around and I go, should I do This Is 50? I mean, I'm 50 now. This Is 50, if it was 10 years after This Is 40, would come out in 2022. So there's definitely a part of me that when I'm around the kids and Leslie, I'm like, and so we've had some of those discussions because we would have to shoot it in a year to have it come out. And I have an idea for it. So I'm just, what I do is I just start dropping the hint, like, you think we should do it? Should we do it? Would you want to do it? Is it weird to do it? And we'll see. We'll see if it coalesces or not.
Awesome. Well, that's a great note to end on. And I can't wait to hear more. But in the meantime, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much again. This has been a blast.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Be well out there.
Yeah, everyone be safe.
Soon.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Then there's the awkward moment before we press leave. Leave. I'm going to make a movie now. It's called Leave.